Transform your product ideas into business realities. My name is Callye, and this is End Hype. Your obsession is emotional, not logical. Stop letting fear guarantee your failure. So on today's show, we're going to talk about overcoming the fear of failure. Maybe in the future, we'll talk about overcoming the fear of success. But if you're just starting out, let's not worry about that. Right? Those are good problems to have, but the world is filled with opportunities. Something that I say all the time. We were just talking about a company that uses it edits all your podcasts and I think your videos as well to insert content that's based on let's say what campaign you're running or what ads you want to run. It's just a weird little quirky problem, and somebody came up with a solution for it. They saw that problem, they saw it as an opportunity, and they came out with a product that doesn't and a service that doesn't. And it's kind of expensive, but it's cheaper than having to do it yourself. It's cheaper than Bobby having to do it. It's cheaper than having me do it, right? So like opportunities are everywhere. Fix what bugs you. You know, if you walk into work and you say, this is terrible, that's the opportunity. But entrepreneurship is in part identifying and solving opportunities by risking capital, risking time, risking talent. And here's something that's less fun is brilliant people. And I find that the smarter the person, the more they're prone to this behavior. Brilliant people are capable of phenomenal mental gymnastics. I have friends and clients that are capable of the most intense mental processing to find why something won't work, why it can't work, why they shouldn't move forward, why they shouldn't get their butt off the couch, why they need to stay at the job that they hate, why they can't pursue a life that they want. All these negative thoughts, all of these fears, and they put all the processes towards why something can never happen for them instead of running through the process that we're going to talk about today of how we separate ourselves from this and we identify those fears, turn them into defined risks, and then we overcome those risks through coherent business strategy. So we're going to go from woo-woo talk to super tactical kind of B-school business process, business strategy talk. So let me run the gamut for you if you'll let me, because this is something that's really interesting. I'm really into this idea right now is so many people that I have the fortune to work with, they have to overcome internal struggles. They have to overcome stories that don't serve them first or early in the process to then be successful as entrepreneurs. They might have the money, the team, they might have all the smarts, even like the experience, the connections. But if they tell themselves a story that it can't be done, they're right. I think that's a little Henry Ford quote. It's like, whether you think it's impossible or not, you're correct. Something like that. Let me just butcher that quote for you. So at any rate, let's go over a 3-step process that I have for overcoming a fear of failure. Okay. And the first thing that we have to understand is that you're not going to become fearless, right? Fear has an evolutionary purpose, right? Fear is saying, hey, if you listen to the interview with Kelly last week, HS Draconis, there be dragons, right? It's like on the edge of the map. We fear the uncertainty. And there's a reason for that, because it's to protect ourselves. But when we don't know why, this can turn into anxiety and it can fester, and we can't really solve those problems. So the first thing that we need to do is we just have to acknowledge that we have fear. Like I said, we're going to be deep in woo territory. I'm going to take this all the way to tactical information and hype information. But When I work with these people, when I work and we coach through these fears of like why they're not applying to Innovation Challenge, why they're not doing a pitch event, why they feel like they're not good enough to enter a startup accelerator or pitch a certain customer or sell for a certain price. People will say, potential entrepreneurs will say that they're highly logical people. You say like, hey, I really think through this. I'm very highly logical. But logic around these risks and fears, it's a mask, right? It's saying that I'm logical. It's a mask for just having fear. They're saying, I'm worked through the problem, and now I know that this can't work. I'm highly logical. It's really just a mask for thinking that they're going to fail. And until you can be honest, it's really hard to move past something and to make a real plan when you can't acknowledge that you have fear and you just think that you've done the math, you've done the mental work, and it can't work. You're just finding why it can't work versus going through this process and identifying how it can. There's an interesting flip side to this, is that people will have, they'll have the total opposite, right? They'll figure out that there's no possibility for being wrong. They won't acknowledge the fear the other way, and they'll be pretend fearless, or they'll have poisonous positivity, right? And it's really just to overcome this bubbling anxiety and depression and fear that they have. So like they'll have the mask the other way. So instead of kind of being the Eeyore or the naysayer, they'll be like the cheerleader, the super excited person. And instead of doing the competitive analysis that they're really worried about, they'll just say like, we dominate, we're so incredible that we don't need to do this. So, and I call that poisonous positivity. It's it comes off as fake. It comes off as weird, and because it's not authentic. It's not how that person really feels. It's not connected to reality, and everybody can tell. You can tell. So the basic thing is just this first step is a big hurdle for people. Just acknowledge that you have fear, that you are afraid of something happening. And our second step is to ask why. We need to ask why and find a root cause. What is going to happen to you? What are you actually afraid will happen, right? So people are like, I'm afraid that I'm going to fail. What does failure mean? I don't know. I guess I'll go out of business. You formed an LLC. Like, what's actually going to happen? The LLC is going to go bankrupt or go out of business? Like, well, what is that going to mean? And why are you afraid of that? So it will come down to some external factor or one of the points that we've mentioned here, but it rarely is like, hey, I'm going to fail and I'm going to lose all of my money, because if we identify that, it's pretty clear, like, hey, I'm going to lose my house. I'm afraid that we're going to be out on the street. Well, let's build a plan to mitigate that risk. And it's a little down the road, but most people, their failure is a fuzzy term. It's nebulous, right? You can't grab onto it. And unless we can make that actual fear, we can know the why, that we can know the what of it, it can't be solved, right? You can't account for risks and get that well-deserved sleep without understanding the core, right? So I categorize these risks into the human needs. So in my opinion, right, the fear of failure is tied to a shortcoming in meeting our expectations, our desires, our needs for a core human need. Okay? And those core human needs are certainty, variety, significance, connection, growth, contribution. And we look for things, and often one of these needs being unfulfilled is the reason why you got started, right? It's not because you're poor, because people are perfectly happy and they don't have money. use the term poor, and it doesn't motivate them to start a business, right, or to put themselves at risk. So it fits into one of these core human needs of why. It's the why you get started, but it's also the why people have fear, because they're afraid they're going to fail in one of these domains, right? So let's just go over these really quickly. So certainty is the assurance that you can avoid pain, you can gain pleasure, safety, and security. That's one of those Maslow hierarchy of needs things, right? We're going to have food, shelter, and we want to assure ourselves, and by extension our family, that we're going to be able to provide that future reality that's going to work out for everybody. So common fear is that people are afraid of bills. They're afraid of caring for their family. Like, if I start this thing and I quit my job, will I be able to pay my bills? And this is a perfect example. It's a really common question. I ask people, well, why is it binary? Right? When we come up with our strategic plan, and we'll talk a little bit more about mitigating risks in the third topic, why do you have to quit your job to try this out? Why can't we create a plan where we devote enough time for this to flourish and then evolve, and you can then quit your job, right? So if we know that that's what we're afraid of, that's a good example, is that we can then plan for it to all work out. But if it's unknown, we're just kind of like, I don't know if this is going to work out. And it's like, it might not. Statistically, it probably won't your first time, right? Maybe not your second time. But if we can reduce the risk down to close to zero, there's no certainty issue about trying. So the second one being variety, it's the need for the unknown, change, new stimuli, adventure. I think this is one of the kickstarters, the impetus for starting a business or even doing freelancing or something like that. But it's usually why people want to leave a dead-end job. They've realized that maybe because of their background, they're not going to get the responsibilities that they want. They can't explore the knowledge set that they want. They are stuck doing the same thing over and over and over again. They can't see a future that they want to participate in. So starting a business is kind of the only path. It's the only path. Instead of working in the system, it's to create a new system. And that's great. But once you get into business, or you start, dipping your toe in the water, there's a lot of fears around this for, hey, social media is a big part of my business. Am I going to have to post every day? That seems really boring. Do I have to do my own bookkeeping? How do I do it? Like, this seems really boring, right? So a lot of the pieces of business are not things that you're going to enjoy, right? And they might be simple, or they might seem difficult right now. Once you learn how to do them, they're not, nothing is that complicated, right? But you might not want to do them. You're like, this doesn't hit that novelty, or later that significance piece for me. So we look at those and we put it on our team roadmap and say, hey, that's something that we should outsource, right? If this doesn't light you up, it's really hard to grow a business to any reasonable level if there's a core element of it that doesn't serve you as your core need, right? So people have this fear, like, I'm going to have to do a bunch of work that I dislike. Like, you're going to have to try it. You're going to have to taste it. You're going to have to understand it. But you're also going to have to build a team that's going to allow you to scale so you don't have to do it. But that's just an example, right? People definitely have fears that if they do this, that they're going to be stuck doing it, right? They're going to be stuck serving a group of people, or they're going to be stuck in an industry, or it's going to absorb all of their time so they can't do their hobby. And this goes back to, we had a podcast that we were talking about goals. I'm always talking about this, is that we become the engineer of our own life, right? So when you're building a business and you have a fear that if you do this, it's going to absorb all of your free time and impact so many other things in your life, what we want to do is design a business that serves the life that you want. So if variety and novelty of your free time, so you can go, drive your car through the mountains or go hiking or, I don't know, what underwater archery or whatever the hell you like, build your business to achieve that thing. Because otherwise you're right to be afraid, right? Because you're engineering your own prison instead of your own escape, right? So the third one, significance. And another great reason why people want to start a business isn't just for the significance of like, hey, I'm some rich dude who got the Rari money and this is great, but it's like they're at work and they never really got to do the thing that they wanted to do. They never got to work on a project that they felt like was big, right? It was important and compelling. But significance is just feeling unique, important, special, needed, having some level of independence. And yeah, there's great jobs out there. There's great organizations that their leadership makes sure to make people feel recognized and significant. But that is definitely the exception, not the rule, right? And if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably thinking about chasing after something that is unique, that it's an opportunity that's unavailable for you at like a normal 9-to-5 job. So I think that resonates with people. But a fear is, again, they're going to get stuck doing something that they don't like to do. Or people are worried about external factors. And this is a huge one, is that it's the significance into the community, is that people are wondering if you're going to make it, right? There's that crazy guy, he quit his awesome job, or I told him he should just go to school and he should just, fly right and do the right thing and just work that crap job and then get slow promotions. And he quit and he's struggling and I knew it. And you're hearing all these stories, and like, no matter how many times you tell yourself that story, you're not getting past it. You can't get past it by just telling it to yourself all the time. You're just embedding it in your thinking. But there's people's external opinions of yourself. I don't know, internet haters, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, that can be a fear that stops people. It's like, hey, what's my mom going to think of me? What's my dad going to think of me? What my friend's going to think when I tell them, like, no, I can't hang out. I quit my job. I'm doing this awesome thing. There's all these funny stories of like people saying like, hey, you're still doing that whatever thing. And then they see you on the internet and then they ask for a job, right? There's like, it's like people want to put you in a box. I understand that. They want to understand you in a very specific way, maybe based on experience, based on their history with you, based on their personal experience or who they are. And that can get to you, right? If you are externally motivated by the recognition of other people, it's hard to go overcome that, like trying to be successful into success. I think that sets you up for later when you are successful, right? It's not if, when you're successful, to crave that recognition as well. So we'll talk about mitigating that. But if you're seeking significance outside yourself, this is a little woo-woo thing, you need to think about why and figure out how you can get that significance internally, meet internal goals, things that you actually specifically care about, not things that other people care about for you, because otherwise they're kind of like the captain of the ship, right? And you're quitting a job where somebody else is telling you what to do, and you're getting like these undefined internet haters are now your boss. For some reason, they're making decisions about your life. Seems really weird behavior, but these are the thoughts that go through people's mind. So fourth is love or connection, strong feeling of closeness or union with someone or something. So I'm going to break out the someone or something. Something, when we talk about groups that we want to serve and problems that we want to solve, I always have people start with a group of people that they actually care about, right? So a tribe that they're a member of, because you're going to be working with them for 5 years, 10 years, maybe the rest of your life. It seems like the most authentic strategy and most powerful strategy for connecting with customers is to actually have a connection, right? Not to kind of engineer or archetype a messaging strategy, but just to actually talk to them. And you talk to them because you know them. So having that connection will kind of fill that bucket. But people are afraid. They're afraid of leaving their work friends, or not having time for their relationship or their spouse, or having work-life balance issues, or they're worried about not being able to get customers, right? People not caring about what they're solving. We have to understand where those fears come from, and then we can come up with a strategy and say, like, hey, work-life balance is super important to me. I want to make sure that I set aside this time for my kids, or for my spouse, or for my girlfriend, or for my friends, right? This is really important for me. This kind of connection to this group is really important. And once you understand that, we can build a life that matters to you, and those can be less fears and more just something that we acknowledge and we can overcome. So, but really common, people ignore that and think, I'm going to power through this. And that's why so many entrepreneurs get divorced, right? It's a relationship thing, a money thing, right? So you're right to worry, but you're not right to not take action. I don't know. Let's put more double negatives in that sentence. So, and then moving on to our fifth core human need is growth. It's an expansion of capacity, capability, understanding. Again, the fear of this is a huge driver for people initially of why they want to start something. But then they transfer that fear over into their new venture, right? So it becomes a fear of, I don't know how to do social media. I don't know how to approach venture capitalists. I don't know how to pitch a product. I don't know how to do sales. Like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know. And you're afraid of the growth, and it's overwhelming. So one, learning things that make us uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable is how we get better, right? And once we can prove to ourselves that we can do those little things, we can build a lot of confidence. That's really great. But harp on this like every single episode is go get a mentor, right? When you look at that and you say, hey, this is actually like, I'm excited about this growth, but I'm really afraid about having to do these new things that I don't know how to do. And this is going to really stress me out. People say things like, oh, it really stresses me. Or I'm really afraid that somebody's going to do this, or that nobody's going to listen to me like this, or I'm really afraid of all these things that I don't know. That's great. At least you know you can write them down then. But it's supposed to be a growth experience. It's supposed to be difficult because it's worth doing. And if you can take that step of actually write down, hey, I'm afraid of Instagram. You can choose to partner. You can choose to overcome it. You can choose to go on Udemy and get a course for $5 that teaches you everything about social media marketing. You can learn it. You can hire. You can do anything. You have total power and dominion over your fear once it's defined, right? And then lastly, a human need is for contribution. And that's the way I say it, is doing something that matters, right? living a life that you did something that moved the needle in whatever department that is important to you. That's like having that life purpose and that why. But contribution it's a sense of service and focus on helping, giving to, supporting other people. That kind of goes back to that whole customer thing of actually like caring about customers. But a huge fear is that people are going to do something. You're going to have a product launch and you're going to announce it and nobody's going to care. It's going to be like shouting into the darkness. And we need to know. We need to know, like, this is what you're trying to do and you're afraid that you're not going to achieve it, right? We need to build a plan to actually do it. Knowing the life that you want to have is really important, but knowing your business goals and your business objectives and your community objectives and your impact, right, is important. If we can define what you're trying to do and what you're afraid of, we can make plans. So I don't know. I really like those 6 human needs. Shout out to my friend Alex, because he was talking about this the other day, and we're going to drop the interview with Alex from a ways back that was on End Hype Live. Great marketer, but he's made me think more about the neuroscience behind business itself and kind of the human motivation aspects, because we can make strategies and plans all day long, but if I give you the plan and it doesn't conform to one of those stories that you're telling yourself, there's no way you're going to execute on it. I can't just say, hey, let's do these 10 things, because you won't do them. And I've seen this over and over and over again. So, like I said, I'm really into this idea, because now I want to get really technical about how organizations that are larger than startups or beginning entrepreneurs do it. This is how we do this at K-Form. This is part of how we are ISO compliant. And this is something that we have to do to land large contracts, is understanding risk mitigation. So you can see on large projects, things like risk registers. There's different risk frameworks for identifying different risk categories and assessing them. But this is the basic recap, right? Once you define the fear, I'm afraid this will happen, we can focus on defining the risks that could make that fear true, right? Once we define those risks, we can make a battle plan, right? And I'm ready to go to battle with you, right? I'm ready to win, but I can't take action in like a fog, right? You're just going to be indecisive. You're going to be all over the place. It's impossible to have intentional, focused strategies without knowing the challenges. It's impossible to gain mastery over fear without knowing the risks, right? So here's the deal. Without doing this work or having a ton of experience, confidence is just arrogance, right? So let's break down risks into 4 main categories, and we'll think about these. So all of those fears, they have a risk that will make those things true. And I want to drop them into these different categories. So strategic, operational, compliance, and financial risks, right? So if you're worried that you're going to have relationship problems because of money, we can put it into the financial risk category. And then we can talk about plans later, things like looking at cash flow analysis, right? Understanding how to read your P&L, income statement, how to calculate a burn rate, how to make different financial models. Like, we can actually build business tools around to help you mitigate that risk, which is a financial risk category, which is for the fear of you not being able to pay your bills and provide for your family. See how that works? And it drips back all the way from woo-woo to let's go, right? So strategic risks, they're there are uncertainties impacting strategic objectives, things in the market. So generally, we're looking at that like competition risks. We're looking at industry changes. We're looking at tech changes are a really big deal. So I always look at disruptive technology, innovation in the market. So like if I'm building a business that's in a market where I think in 3 years or 5 years there's going to be massive disruption, I would consider that a strategic risk. It's like, are we moving into that disruption or against it? So are we doing something that is going to have significance and contribution to the market within the time frame that we need that business to exist? If we're trying to exit a business in 5 years or 10 years, is that whole market going to even exist in that time frame? It's a really important question with the movement of today's innovation. Like if I was starting a school today, I would be like, I think that digital learning is going to displace a lot of education in the immediate future. And in 3 to 5 years, we have zero idea of what education is actually going to look like. So I can be part of that disruption, and I have to kind of ride that uncertainty and novelty and all of those pieces and understand that, or I could work against it and I could create a brick and mortar school and kids aren't allowed to go there. And I have physical teachers sitting in classrooms and so this allows us to be smart or not smart, to think about things and put them in a nice little spreadsheet and then go talk to our mentors about what we fear and the risks that are driving those. So operations, for most people that are starting, operations is really going to rely down on teams and processes, right? If you start a business, you probably have zero processes and really difficult to scale. But in a lot of businesses coming now, we're looking at like operational weaknesses, like how does this contribute to cybersecurity? How does this contribute to theft? How does this contribute to, again, scalability, hireability, trainability, all of those pieces. So if we go back to our fears, it's like, I don't want to be stuck doing the same crap every single day. I don't want to do this piece. I'm like, well, maybe little tactic here is you read a little bit about it, you try it, you create a process, you go engage that process with a new team member or an outside organization. They help you improve that process because they're a third party that has to walk through it for the first time. And they're going to be like, this makes zero sense. They improve it, right? And then they do it for you. And that's how businesses scale, right? Maybe you have a virtual assistant do it. Maybe you have another organization do it, and then you bring it in-house because you do it at a scale where you should hire somebody. But operational risks, big deal. Very specific, though. Financial risks, huge thing, of course. Everyone's favorite risk is that they won't get funding to launch their business. So we come up with the different risks. Financial risks usually are like, hey, we're not going to have enough money to get to production manufacturing. We're not going to have enough money to get to through engineering and compliance. We're not going to have enough money to reorder after our first launch, or to afford a proper marketing campaign. If we can put these risks down and we can actually create a financial model, we can mitigate them with revenue building strategies, with getting investment at the right times and at the right amounts. So huge amount of fears people put into that financial category, but they're completely justified, but they're not actually defined, right? They're like, I feel like I don't have enough money, I'm going to go out of business. I'm like, you're probably right. If you think that that's the case, you're probably right, because most people that think they're doing great, they're going out of business too. So we need to have a better financial model. And then compliance risks. This is a fun one, and people don't think about it. But when you're testing products, maybe they have UL certification, right? Maybe you have different hiring practices that you have to be compliant to. Maybe in our manufacturing facility, we have OSHA and we have VOSHA and we have environmental regulation. We have Dodd-Frank Act for specialty metals. We have ITAR. We have FAR compliance, DFAR compliance, right? We have lots and lots of regulatory structure compliance that we have to put in the risks. It's like I have to check every 3 months, 6 months, every year, like what are the changes to the regulatory structure so we can still be relevant as a business. That's specific to me. But initially, it might just be like, how do we set up our books so when we're audited, our accountant has it straight, right? So, simple compliance things. Usually people are worried about money, right? Or they're worried about safety. So, but those are simple risk categories, and we can go through an easy framework where once we've identified the risk and we've put it into that category, we can actually assess the risk, and we can say, like, what's the probability of this actually happening, right? And we can rank that probability. We can rank its frequency, and then we can actually come up with a plan. Then we can measure it, and we'd say, like, have we mitigated this risk or have we not? But I think that looking at this from a very clinical standpoint is a great way to engage mentors, because if you have somebody who's has that zero on their bank account, right? They have that couple years on you. They're going to have already been through these. They're going to say, oh man, you don't know. Here's this compliance risk that you're probably unaware of. You should check this out. And here's how we get around it so you can put it down. And if you are going for funding, looking at these risks and putting them out, these are great objection handlers, right? Where somebody says, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? Well, we've identified that risk, and here's our plan and how we're going to solve it. Here's how we're solving it now, and this is how we're going to solve it at this point, and here's how we're going to solve it and beyond. And it shows that you're savvy. It shows that you understand how real business happens, not just ideas, because that's what we're doing, right? That's what NHype is doing. We're helping you transform ideas into business reality. So if you have questions about this, message me, because this can get really, really detailed on the risk identification, risk assessment, and risk mitigation. But that's where we're getting really like in the weeds as a coach, getting in the weeds about business building, about growth, about that development strategy. It's really cool. But early on, just think about like why you feel the way that you feel, right? The next time I put out an innovation challenge and it says, hey, we're calling all people that have ideas like this, and you have that amazing idea, why aren't you doing it? And you might think that you've come up with all these logical reasons. Oh, there must be so many people applying. Oh, that's for people that want like this. But those are just masking some kind of fear that you have of inadequacy, of uncertainty. Like, just go through it, listen to this again, and realize that you can put that in a box. Like, you can bound that fear in a box, and you can reach out to me, and I'll help you write a pitch. And I don't know, we have pretty good history of people winning pitch events and innovation challenges. I mean, so when you see an opportunity, and the world is filled with opportunities, don't just logic your way out of success. Realize that that's just some kind of mask for being afraid, right? Anyways, this is just something that I'm working through, and I feel like is really important to people, because so many people, they're not failing when they're in the business. They're failing because they don't even start. So what is preventing you from starting? What's the reason why you won't do the thing that you know you should do? Why aren't you pursuing your idea or your dream or your passion? Why aren't you doing it? And it's probably something to do with the fear. But comment down below if you're having a problem or you're holding your back. And listen, if you got a gold nugget out of this, if you got a piece of information that's like, yes, that makes sense, I see what's happening now. If you got some value out of this, please share the show. If you're watching on YouTube, smash the thumbs up button, right? Subscribe, all those fun things. Hit the notification bell if you want. But if you're listening to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, give us a little review. I'd really appreciate it. It shows me that somebody's watching. You know, it's great. I appreciate it. But thank you for your time. My name is Callye. This has been End Hype.